They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
My name is Brian Wood, and I serve with the 1st Battalion, the Princess of Wales's Royal Regiment, and I served for 17 years.
Mate, you have a challenge going on at the moment, which I think maybe ties into the subject of remembrance. Can you tell us a bit about what you're up to?
Yeah, so I've been training hard for the up-and-coming challenge, which is called the Ultimate Sacrifice, and it starts on November the 1st because it's a very poignant month for what we're about to speak about. And I don't know, after seeing what was happening regarding Afghanistan, I wanted to switch the narrative into a positive, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to run for every fallen service personnel that's lost their life during the Iraq and Afghanistan campaign, which is 635. I'm going to be running no less than 26 miles a day for 25 days, so 25 marathons in 25 days, remembering and representing, the bravest our country have got to offer. So, the training's been graft, but it's, the pain that I'm in is nothing compared to the pain that the families that have lost loved ones. So, yeah, I'm itching to get going now.
Do you think that maybe this is the direction that we need to take remembrance as, like, the Afghanistan, Iraq generation? Because obviously, you and I, we went together to the Albert Hall, which I think I say was one of the best nights of my life, mate. Really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed that. But we have this ability to use social media and stuff now. So do you think challenges like this are what our generation should be kind of getting into? Not necessarily that many nutcase marathons, but, that kind of challenge.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, every little helps, doesn't it? And we have got social media now to really, make people aware of how important remembrance is. And remembrance can't afford to disappear, because there's been so many sacrifices since the greatest generation, which we will continuously and continue on to remember without a shadow of a doubt. But obviously, as that generation, unfortunately, passes, we've still got a duty to remember the conflicts that we were involved in and those who had lost their lives during. So, yeah, we will continue to remember. I think it's so important. And I think we've got a duty to represent and remember. And, I will always continue to do that. And it's passed down into my family, and they're educated on the sacrifice of, which has been so many lives, and what the importance is of remembrance. And it's just overly important. And the month of November, on the run up to, for the Poppy Appeal and for Remembrance, the 11th, and then Remembrance Sunday, which is going to be on the 14th this year, I certainly will be doing my bit.
How do you approach the subject with your kids?
For me, it's very easy. I've grown up in a heavily military family, so it's just given them an understanding of what the British Army are, what they do, and they just don't go war fighting. If there's an issue with, logistics, the vaccine, for instance, the British Army will jump on it. If there's a fire strike, the British Army will take over. If there's floods, we'll get in there and sandbag, and we'll do as much as we can to represent. And it just goes on and on and on. And so it's just not war fighting. There's so much humanity, there's so much aid that we're involved in, and we're just very good at being flexible. It's a principle of war, but also we put it, forward, front foot with what we do in the UK. So the thing is, I'm massively passionate. My son Bailey is my eldest at the moment. He's 3/4 way through his military training for the parachute regiment. So it's ingrained in our genes, and they'll be doing their thing as well during Remembrance.
Your dad served. What's like your earliest remembrance kind of memories?
Yeah, his lightweights, his jersey heavy wool, them really old type boots that they had, and just his pride in his uniform. I could smell the starch. I could, is just seeing him take care of it, in his appearance, and him really being proud to be a soldier. And it was just, it just educated me and inspired me. And I was destined to be a footballer, actually, but it didn't work out. And the next thing on my agenda was serving my country. If I can't play for my country, I'll serve my country. And I went on my journey. But yeah, very influenced by my dad. Still am to date. And yeah, it's ingrained in our family, like I've said before. So, and it's important. It's just nothing that it's not. It's something that we just don't go. Okay, yeah, well, it is what it is. It's not that. Remembrance is because people have paid the ultimate sacrifice. They're no longer here to enjoy, the things that we enjoy each day, and also a lot of us have lived with the trauma of seeing fallen comrades, and and it brings a lot of emotion back. And remembrance is also a massive reunion, which is really important because we don't get together that often, and people make a conscious effort once a year. If they've not got any associations to link themselves to, they will go and they'll let their hair down, during that time of remembrance. So it has a lot of links and a lot of importance. And I'm just I'll actually be on my 11th 14th marathon, and I'll be, don't know what state I'll be in, but I'm hoping to finish at the cenotaph at 11 o'clock. Finish the marathon complete with Michael Coates, because he's my route guide for the London route. So
I've heard of him. He's got awful podcasts about it. No, I love Coaty. Mate, how was you came to Remembrance as a young lad. You went through it in the military, both on tour and through obviously what would happen to you with courts and all that kind of stuff. Has it been a bit of a, as Remembrance, the meaning of it changed to you? Has it become more personal over the years?
I think it has, because I've experienced, on operations, and I've seen the devastation of conflict, and I've also laid 2 fellow soldiers to rest. I laid them into the ground, and seeing that Union Jack being, put into a triangle to then being passed over to their family, it's hard yards. So it is very personal to me, and that's when I go into making sure that my family are fully aware. But I don't need to remind them that they are fully aware anyway.
What do you think we do well in this country with Remembrance, and where do you think we have room for improvement?
I think we're such a humble nation, and I like it like that. Yeah, we can be a bit more patriotic, but I do like our humbleness as a nation, and people will turn up, people will show up. And for example, Portsmouth Football Club, they're doing their Remembrance game on Saturday. I know that Millwall Football Club are also doing their Remembrance on Saturday, and other sporting organisations will be doing the same. And yes, we don't shout from the rooftops, but we are very, very proud of our armed forces. And can we do better? I think we can, but I don't know the certain areas. I'm not the oracle, but what I do get a sense of, gratitude. I do get a sense of gratitude. I get a sense of, our country being proud of what we stand for as a nation, and all that has gone before. And I do like it like that. It's quiet but powerful, and it's meaningful. When you're constantly shouting about it, sometimes it becomes, a consistency where it's good, but it kind of doesn't have the impact of that yearly, surprise, that yearly, sort of momentum to the 11th. And I don't know what else I would change, because people will do what they want to do. If they don't want to wear a poppy, then that's fine. That's up to them. And people will wear their poppy with pride. People have, 25 poppies, and they'll go and buy other things that have meaning as well with the poppy appeal and what it stands for. They will show up and they'll go and pay their respects around whatever town and village, because, like I know, in all towns, I live in the country, and when I'm running, I come across memorial after memorial after memorial, and some are actually recent, which is brilliant. It's great to see some recent memorials, and there's obviously a lot from the First and Second World War, clearly, but I think there'll be still, this will continue, in my opinion, forevermore, and it's down to us to keep, representing, keep doing things like this. I think is really important on your why, and I think it's special each year.
Mate, just one last one. You mentioned the poppy there. Does that stir a certain kind of feeling in you? When you see that kind of symbol, does it hold a special place for you?
I think it holds a special place for most. It does for me. It does for my family, and I think it does for most as well. And I'll continue to wear that symbol. Everyone knows what it is. Everyone knows that symbol, and what the poppy stands for. And there's always going to be debates, but that's just white noise for me. I know the purpose, I know the meaning, I know what's gone before it, and why we wear that with, a symbol of respect, sacrifice, and we will always remember unless we forget.
I'm Amy Goodman, a sculptor based in Hampshire. It's a fantastic place called Project Workshops.
So you're involved in a very unique form of remembrance, but one that everybody will be familiar with, in that you create these sculptures, these statues that form a focal point of remembrance. How did you get into that?
Well, I've been doing this since I graduated in the late 90s, and it was really, I think, in 2014 when I sort of won the commission to sculpt the World War I Romsey Warhorse and Trooper, that I really that was my first commemorative piece. And I sort of got to know a lot of local people in Romsey from all walks of life who made that happen. And also through fundraisers. It was just a very good collaborative process. And also I got to know about the history, people who, for example, my grandmother used to sit on the cliff tops at Southampton and watch the horses get loaded up onto the ships going across to France. And it sort of made it much more personal when I heard individual people's stories and so forth. As a sculptor, I just wanted to do the best job I possibly could to commemorate the fallen, the horses, mules and men who gave the ultimate sacrifice for the freedom we have today, really. And from that, because I shared the making of the work on social media and my website, I started getting into giving talks, which I was terrified of to begin with, and sort of talking with people about the process of sculpture. And then from that, I just think my name spread, and then I started to get approached and invited to sort of pitch for other like sculptures in the future. So, for example, Pegasus and Bellerophon, the reinstated insignia of the airborne forces, for Merville Barracks in Colchester, and that was in 2017, sort of the first ancient airborne warriors. And so such a dramatic, amazing sculpture to make, the drama, also a good sort of engineering challenge as well. So that was great. And then sort of Trio, who sniffed out IEDs in Afghanistan with his handler Dave Hayhoe. Again, meeting people through the processes, it brings home the valor and the heroism, and just also the horrific situations that happen in war. And so it's just really kind of happened organically from that. And in between that, other commissions for people, equestrian pieces as well as military. So it's been a great technical challenge for me, and I'm learning all the time about how to improve as a sculptor, whilst also telling a story as well.
Where were you introduced to the idea of remembrance? Was it something that you were familiar with as a child?
At school, I think it was, remembrance was important. I particularly think, though, it was with the centenary of World War I that I think all of us have become much more aware of it. I mean, I didn't personally have my own family, my close family, serve as veterans myself. I had distant family who were involved, I think, in helping people get out of Germany in the Second World War. And I had an uncle who was in the military. But really, it was through my work that I got more involved. But and I think the centenary was really where a lot of people, I think, really looked into their families' histories, perhaps their grandfather who served, and brought it home. And of course, I think, that the Brits as well do that so well. And I think, wearing the poppy, the red poppy and the purple poppy now to commemorate the fallen animals as well, which I think is important. And I think it's good for kids to grow up and learn about this stuff. And we shouldn't forget, we must remember.
Obviously, in Britain, we've got war memorials in every village, every town throughout the country. What you do is, I think you put a human face or a canine face on or equestrian face onto these sculptures. Do you think that is that like kind of a part of an evolution of the way that we, we remember? And is that something that you think is it important to show people rather than have this wall with obviously names on, which can be quite overwhelming at times? Do you think that just brings it to people in a way that they can more easily grasp?
I think it's a combination. I think sometimes just seeing a list of names brings home the numbers, and I think and I think visiting the graveyards in France as well, and the cemeteries, that brings it home. But yes, I guess I work intuitively, so I'm surrounded by my resource material, and I guess I quite early on often get an image of what I think is strong. And for the Romsey Warhorse, there was a Lionel Edwards sketch, and he was a captain of the Remount Depot in Romsey, and some of his sketches were a starting point for me, and I quickly picked up on the connection between a trooper and his horse, and that I kind of went on from that. And then also there's the aesthetic challenge. You want to have a sculpture that looks good and works in the round in all three dimensions. And also I like to use good, strong textures. I love sort of a classical sculpture like Rodin, and it really captures psychology and emotion. So I wanted to show this young lad of about 17. A lot of them were very young. And I wanted to show the furrows and his brow. This is a young man whose innocence has been taken away, and he's seen things we can only imagine. And it's body language between an animal and man, whether it's an individual human, whether it's a Gurkha carrying a British Tommy. I want to show an aesthetically figurative sculpture that looks technically competent, but equally I want to show the emotion in the piece without it becoming sentimental. And so it's a balance, I'm always trying to find. And then through speaking with the clients and developing sketches and scale models, I'm also get a good idea as to what they like and what they're after. And I think it's important to work with, the commissioning body, as well as often they do trust, though, that they trust me to do my job properly. So it's quite nice. Most of the time I'm trusted to get on with it, but I always do like to have feedback, and I'm not afraid of someone saying something. I think it's important.
On that then, there's, when you go through London, you walk through London, there's military themed statues, throughout the city, central London. Is there anywhere, to your knowledge, that does that like Britain does?
I mean, obviously, commemorative sculpture does happen all over the world. I mean, in France, there's a lot of commemorative work. In the US, but I think also in Europe. I mean, in French villages, for example, there are lots of war memorials dotted around the villages, and obviously you've got the big cemeteries and big dramatic memorials over there. I haven't traveled all over the world to see, but I know in South Africa, I know in Australia, in the Far East. I mean, there are memorials, and I don't want to really say one's better than the other. I think people and cultures remember in different ways, and I think people have sacrificed their lives fighting for their countries all over the world. And I think sometimes it can be unifying, actually thinking that you've got young men and women now increasingly who actually, if it wasn't for the situation, they might sit around a table and have a conversation and have things in common. It's just war is a very complex, difficult thing, and there are sacrifices everywhere. But and I think it's later on historical context helps people see things in a more rounded way, and it's sometimes there is no resolution, as we know what's been happening lately. That it's very tragic, and there's a lot of loss of life. But sometimes, you could argue it has to happen because there are atrocities that happen, and our soldiers step in where no one else would, and and I think that's amazing, and I think we should pat them on the back and be grateful for them doing that.
You mentioned war graves in Europe. Is one of the reasons why sculptures and memorials have become so important in Britain because those, the war dead are not really in Britain, and that it's some kind of like somewhere for communities to come together?
Yes, no, that's a really good point. And I actually think that the war graves bodies should be congratulated, because I remember when I was sort of making the Romsey Warhorse, Major General Patrick Cordingley, who was our patron, gave some really emotive talks about, can you imagine? I mean, there were just tens of thousands of boys and men slain in some of those battles in the most atrocious conditions, muddy conditions. And, there were people there who did their best to locate the bodies and identify them. And obviously, we know the very famous procession of the unknown warrior, which is to all those people who've not had closure because, some people couldn't be identified and never have been able to be identified. But there are people who have done their best to, as much as possible, give these individuals a burial and a service of commemoration to thank them. And that must be a nigh on impossible task. So yes, there's a lot of British dead all over France and Europe. You're right.
So, Amy, you mentioned the the kind of the military community and the people that you've met through this. Has there been one community in particular that you found was like a very kind of tightly knit one, or something you maybe experienced that you weren't expecting to in those regards?
Definitely the airborne community. When I made the para for Princess Gardens in Aldershot, and he was installed a couple of years before the Gurkha Memorial, they were amazing. It's a really close-knit community, and that was raised through all the paras and their families and friends making donations, and that's how that statue happened. It had the backing of the local council for planning, but it was most of the funds, it absolutely came from the airborne community, and they really are a closely knit bunch. And the unveiling was, I've had some amazing unveilings, and that was incredibly special. And Woody gave just a brilliant speech just before the unveiling, and of course it was like clockwork, and the processions through the town, and sort of Aldershot came alive again, because obviously it was the home of the British Army. And then I made some soldiers for the anniversary of Normandy and Arnhem, and they were snapped up so fast. But they're a great bunch, and if any of them are ever in trouble, even if they've never met each other, they'll be there for each other. It's this brotherhood. So, I'm just grateful through all the different amazing people, communities that I'm meeting through my work. And it's a privilege. It really is. I love it. I absolutely love my job.
I'm Danny Rampling, former member of the 10th Battalion, the Parachute Regiment, service 1983 to 86.
Danny, when did you first get introduced to the idea of Remembrance?
Through my grandfather, who was a military man, long service military influence upon me. I lived with him. So I was born in the 60s, so that wasn't long after the Second World War. So Remembrance was deeply ingrained in our culture here in Britain. And we would always take time on Remembrance Sunday to remember those who had fallen and observe the 2-minute silence. If I can remember right, that happened in primary school as well. So there was the history was taught, and also there was the Poppy Day lead up to it. So schools would participate in that.
I suppose at the time, then, there was probably some teachers in your school who had served, or definitely had family who had served.
Yeah, there was, yeah.
Is that something that has come out of education now, do you think?
It appears that way, doesn't it? And I think the current state of affairs with everything that's going on, it does feel that those freedoms that they sacrificed so greatly for seem to have been somewhat forgotten with this this thing that's going on at present globally. So Remembrance Sunday is a very poignant day for me personally, because my grandfather was a great influence upon me, and he encouraged me, and he encouraged and influenced me to join the army. And so the day for me is in his memory, and all of his generation and the generations that have followed, that have sacrificed and been wounded, and lives lost in conflicts. And it's very important that we do remember them. It's not a day to glorify war, and it's not a day of kind of banging the drum patriotism, personally, for me.
Is it fair to say then that you're not just remembering the fallen, but remembering the ideals that they fell for?
Absolutely. Their values and ideals are what has shaped our culture here in Britain into the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and into part of the 80s. But I think we have kind of lost some of those values in sections of society. And history is very important, and history has been. My own son is 17. He hardly knows anything about the Second World War. I took him to Remembrance Sunday in memory of his grandfather 4 years ago. But he had no idea about the parade in Whitehall and the ceremony. But he found it insightful and an experience for him that he wouldn't have otherwise had unless I took him along there. His school weren't going to take him along there. His mother wasn't. So yeah, it was an experience for him in memory of all of those people.
With that younger generation, do you feel like when they're given a chance to know what Remembrance is, that they want to be a part of it?
Well, that I'm not sure of, but I'm just speaking on my own personal experience with my son. But I do feel that, it's 75 years ago. And, to some people, that feels like, a few lifetimes ago. But actually, it's not a great deal of time, 75 years. It's still very recent in recent history. But maybe that's because, I'm a bit older and I'm, in my late 50s. And, I've grown up with that. That's, that history.
Do you think that it changed? Because obviously, we had, after the war, there was a lot of there's Northern Ireland going on, that kind of thing. And, what I personally felt that when the news was covering more of Iraq and Afghanistan, that started to bring more people out to the parades, because it kind of got that back into the public knowledge that, that there are still wars going on, there are still people losing their lives. Is that something that you kind of saw with your local services? What,
around the Iraq and Gulf wars?
Yeah. Did you think it started to bring it back into the public memory a bit more?
It does appear that way, yeah. But, my one thing is, it does make me a little bit angry to see Tony Blair standing in Whitehall. I think it's just complete hypocrisy, for the damage he's done and the lives that were lost in some of those wars. I think Blair is a complete hypocrite and responsible for a great deal of, suffering and lives being lost. So that's my one gripe with Remembrance Sunday, is the hypocrisy of certain politicians.
Yeah, mate, I 100% agree with you totally on that. How do you, well, I don't want to use the word celebrate, but what do you do on Remembrance Sunday?
Well, I'm a member of the local PRA, so sometimes I go to London. In recent years, I've gravitated more back towards Remembrance Sunday, probably in the last decade. I either go to London and meet up with members of the 10th Battalion and other blokes I know, or I stay local and attend a local service. And that's what we'll be doing this year, attending a local service with the local PRA.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, mate. I think it's I've been down to London for it this year. Sometimes I go to the town one. This year I'm going to go to the village.
Yeah.
I think it's important to kind of go to different ones, because it's almost a different feeling that you get from each one. Do you have is there a war memorial close to where you live, like a village kind of level?
Yeah, it's not far. It's a couple of miles away. But it's a reasonably well attended service, and it's fairly well attended for the size of the town. But London is a very high level event, and I'm sure that this year, because there's been a couple of difficult years, that it will be very, very well attended again, as it always generally is in normal circumstances.
How did you feel last year seeing on the news that veterans weren't allowed to march past the cenotaph?
I thought it was appalling. The cenotaph is not an enclosed indoor space with restrictions and so on. And to have that overridden, an appalling lack of respect, whether, you agree with that or not. That's just my own personal view.
Okay, man, I totally agree with you. Danny, any messages on Remembrance that you'd like to leave the listeners with?
Lest we ever forget their sacrifice over the last 100 years, in fact. And let's hope that there's not going to be the scale of that sacrifice into the near and distant future, and that peace and stability comes to the world. But we will never forget them, and we will always remember them.
Tony, 23 years in the Army, 5 in the Green Jackets, and then the rest at 22 SAS in Hereford.
So, Tony, I know you were a member of the cadets as a kid. Is that where you first got introduced to the idea of Remembrance?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. We used to gather on the Sunday as cadets and parade and do the normal stuff.
Like, what was the message that you took away from that as a kid?
Service of others, really. What they did for us, what my parents had done during the war, and those that went before them.
So your dad served in the war, did he?
He did. He was in Lancaster Bombers in Bomber Command. Yeah, flight engineer.
And what kind of experience did he have in that?
He enlisted before the war, so he was an enlisted man. Then did the Dresden raid, which affected him. Then was shot down over Belgium in 1944, and went on to evade capture and up the Freedom Trail and across the Pyrenees into Spain.
So obviously there was a massive amount of casualties in Bomber Command. A lot of the guys didn't come home. A lot were shot down, became prisoners of war. And, as you said, your dad himself was involved on a Dresden raid, which must have been, a very hard thing to have experienced and then had with you for the rest of his life. And
yeah, I'm sure.
What was his like? Because my granddad, he was on the Lancasters, and he never used to go to Remembrance Parade. And I think, to be honest, it was just because it was just too much for him.
Yeah.
Was your dad similar? Well,
yeah, he never attended. I say he never spoke about the war at all, apart from that one time when he mentioned the Dresden operation.
So it's one of those things we think about. We think about, obviously, the physical costs that, the people in the Second World War took. But I think that, for people like your dad, who are, like your dad's a gentleman and everything, they had a very hard, like a massive burden to carry, I think, of, and I think that affected them a lot more than I think people realised at the time. Would you say that's kind of fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't think it's, and it's the Bomber Command one is interesting when it comes to Remembrance as well, because there was no memorial to it or anything, was there, until recently?
Not until recently. The one at Hyde Park was erected, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that says a lot to it. It was almost like it was something that the country kind of wanted to, forget about, everyone in the country wanted to forget about it because it was such a dirty job, but unfortunately one that needed to be done.
Yeah, well, it's 50 years before they actually erected it, sadly.
And so how do you think, because obviously you've served in multiple campaigns, so you've probably seen different attitudes from the British public towards different campaigns. Is that the same when it comes to Remembrance? Do you think that people from Northern Ireland, the Northern Ireland campaign, are given the recognition in Remembrance that maybe they deserve?
Very much so. Yeah, I think it affected people in many different ways. The various campaigns, we lost guys in the Falklands, and then we lost them in Gulf War One.
So is it something that when you were serving in the army, was Remembrance something that the battalions and different regiments that you were in, was it something that they made that they made the day out of?
Yeah, I'm actually marching this year with my former regiment, and we're all going to meet for a beer first, and then take it from there.
Just the one beer?
Or well, I can't afford any more, mate. I'm pensioner now.
I'll ask the listeners if they want to contribute anything to the beer
well,
kitty.
I start a crowdfunding page if anybody's interested.
I'm sure you get a few on there, mate. So when you obviously down in the the Falklands down in '82, coming up on 40 years on that. Do you feel that anniversaries, obviously, every year there's an anniversary, but these special ones, is that something important for Britain to I don't know to use the word celebrate, but to remember?
Particularly the Falklands, because the last successful war that Britain did on its own. We won in the Gulf, but that was a coalition of 11 countries, unlike in the Falklands, which just us, alone.
I suppose something about the Falklands as well is, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but aren't people buried in the cemetery in the Falklands, rather than Afghanistan, Iraq, everybody gets brought home?
Yeah, it wasn't until after the Falklands that the government decided repatriation.
Yeah, that in a way is, because we kind of take it for granted now that you come home and your family will have the grave in your local church or whatever. But I suppose that makes remembrance even more important in your own village or wherever when you don't have that, you haven't got those graves there.
Yeah, very true.
Have you been down the Falklands for
No, I've never gone back. I'd like to have gone next year when the book's published, but I decided not to bother. I'm not one for reminiscing. What's done is done. I think of the guys we lost. Fortunately, we only lost one, but of course the arm, we lost over 200 collectively. So I think of them on remembrance in particular.
How do you think, like in your own way, or maybe other ways, people could remember people? Like, what are the ways that you kind of honour the comrades that you lost?
I don't think you can, really. I think it's just, constantly a reminder. I think about it most days. Certainly not just on Remembrance service. The Royal British Legion do a sterling job in getting the country behind the poppy appeal and all that. I got my poppy, the regimental poppy, that I wear proudly. And I think that's the right thing to do.
Is it fair to say then that Remembrance Day really is for the families and for civilians, to kind of remind them every year rather than the soldiers?
Yeah, for the nation to remember.
My name's Daz. Long story short, I'm ex-Navy.
Boo.
There's a bunch of you out there now. I know, exactly. I was waiting for that. My role in the military, my main core function was communications. So that was my trade. That's what I existed in. What you find within the Navy is you have navies within navies. What I mean by that is you have different groups of vessels that do different roles. So you've got submarines, you've got fleet air arm guys, you've got surface fleet, you've got the amphibious assault groups. There's all sorts of different areas you can find yourself in when serving. For me, it was the amphibious assault ships. So that's where I existed predominantly on HMS Bulwark. Our main role and function, at the time, we were a flagship. And what we did was carry troops around. That was what that ship was designed to do. But in addition to that, what it found itself doing quite a bit was picking people up like expats. So you look at what happened in Lebanon around about 2007. The ship at the time was tasked on its way back from Iraq, basically to divert, head over to Lebanon, pull out a load of civvies, British expats, and remove them from the situation there and bring them to safety. So my role and my function was a comms guy on board that. And that's predominantly where I lived. That was my world, that was my universe. They say you tend to do what your dad does. My old man was at sea for a long time. His old man was at sea before him. His old man was at sea before him. Now, I'd imagine that if he was a Pongo, if he was ex-army, or if he was a crab, ex-RAF, that is the route I would have taken. That would have been the natural progression. Certainly within families where you see that lineage, it's very unusual for people to go a separate path. Now, I say that, and one of the guys I'm really close to within the community is a guy called Adam, and he runs Commando Sundials. His old man was a crab officer, but he decided to join the Corps, become a steely-eyed dealer of death, and that's what he did, and that was his profession. Now, he's probably the exception to the rule. certainly in my experience anyway. Lads tend to do what their fathers did. For me, it was putting on a blue suit, going to sea, and trying my best to get us drunk in as many foreign countries as I can and get into bar fights and chase women. That was basically it.
Mate, I've been doing some work recently on a book about the Falklands, and I have to take my hat off to the Navy for that campaign. Obviously, there was amphibious, ships involved in that operation. It was an amphibious operation; couldn't have happened without the Navy. When you were serving, was there? Obviously, I know it from a point of view of the Royal Welsh. We've got a very strong tradition. Is that something that the Navy has going for it as well? Is there a lot of emphasis put on remembrance and put on tradition?
A huge amount. You've got to imagine, guys, the Navy is the oldest of all the services. The emphasis on tradition is huge. Even so, even to this day, everybody gets issued 2 tins of beer every day. That is your issue. That's just given. Every single day in the Royal Navy, you get issued 2 cans. Now, that goes back to like Nelson's time, where you get issued your tot of rum. So something you've got to appreciate is, whilst certainly in this, taking the Falklands aside of it, and obviously the Second World War, what we've got now is people our age, a little bit older, a little bit younger, and the majority of the kinetic environments have been based around land-based operations. That's just the nature of certainly warfare and warfighting, and has been for a while, certainly through our lives. But prior to that, there were a huge amount of emphasis put on amphibious operations. You look at the D-Day landings. How just you imagine scaling that on getting those bodies ashore. How do you get them from the south coast of England ashore, fit well and ready to fight? The logistics involved in that is absolutely insane. That is a huge, huge pride of place. The Falklands guys that I went through when I was joining, mate, we still had some who were in training and stuff. I was in training. They were in instructor roles or civilian instructors. The guys that stay on and they get sort of licensed in by the MOD to come in and teach them courses. They were there. And they were like gods. Everyone would get out of their way because you knew what had happened in their experience in the military, in their experience in the Navy. And yeah, remembrance, I suppose I've given you a really long answer there to a really short question. My apologies. But yeah, there's a huge amount of emphasis put on it. And we try and remember not only what's happened now, what's happened in the near past, but also going back to Nelson's Day. We still have Trafalgar Day. There's a huge, huge emphasis put around it.
Is remembrance something that you work in your business?
I try not to work it into my business if I can help it. What I tend to do subtly is I'll throw some donations, mate, on military charities around this time of year. We tend to do it throughout the year anyway. What I prefer to do is support lads in expeditions where they're trying to raise money for ongoing causes. So we tend to do that throughout the year. But I don't know, mate. There's a bunch of businesses out there within this, in brackets, veteran-owned space. And I can't help but see a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on products around the remembrance side of stuff. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, as long as the money's going to the right place. But I prefer to do that in private, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's just something that I like to do. We're not trying to gain business or sell product because it's got a poppy on it. That's not what it's about. I don't know. It just doesn't sit well with me. Doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's just preference.
No, I get you. No, I'm going to blow some smoke up your ass, mate, because obviously you are one of our sponsors for the podcast. Been doing it a long time. I like to think this podcast is a part of Remembrance. So, you do get your fingers in the old Remembrance pie through us. Yes.
There's different ways of doing it, mate, and definitely, I wouldn't argue that. I mean, we were both in London
2 years ago, mate. Yeah, I was fucking.
2 years ago.
I was smashed when I wasn't leaving the hotel room at that point.
Bits, mate.
I was after the Albert Hall. I was not coming out. I was not leaving that hotel room after that. After that point, mate, I was cooked.
I saw your social posts after it, mate, and I could understand why. So I think I give you a ring or a text. I was in the Union Jack Club. I was down there and I'd had a few pints in the afternoon myself anyway. But yeah, it's it's a big part of what you do and what you talk about. And I think there's a lot of constructive stuff that comes out of the conversations you have. And weirdly, I really enjoy listening to the ones where it can get a bit smoky, because not only is it an insight for me into environments and operations that I wasn't a part of, but I can also see a huge benefit for you and the listener, or you and the guest, in discussing what you discuss. It's almost like, I don't know, I don't want to say a counselling session, mate, but it's better to talk about stuff sometimes.
Absolutely, mate. That fucking Remembrance a couple of years ago, I was still working out the demons there, mate. They were still getting worked out then, but, there you go. What is it like? Do you have a bit of a routine for Remembrance Day, or does it change every year, or how do you go about it?
What it's been for me, mate, I'm up in Liverpool now. So prior to that, I go down to the local spot in Swansea. A load of the lads, some of the lads actually served with you that I've recognised them from your thoughts, mate, that you've put up on Insta. The lads I grew up with, they went off, became soldiers in the British Army. I went off, shaved my head, and went to sea. But everyone gets together in the centre of Swansea. There's a church there called St Mary's, and there's a cracking boozer opposite it. So you turn in, you do your bit with the bish, and then everyone meets up after it for wets. Since I moved up north, mate, it was fairly difficult to do that, obviously because of the travelling times and the distances. But I'm lucky to be part of a rugby club up here, mate, and we've got quite a good tri-service representation there. So we tend to have our own thing. It's one of the oldest clubs in Liverpool. There were lads there that went to World War II and the Great War prior to that. So we've got our own cenotaph at the club.
Fucking hell.
To remember the lads that the club basically lost in those campaigns.
Mental.
So we've got a local bishmate who comes round. He does his thing, a few words. We get the ditty off the RBL website for the last post and stuff. And then, we do our bit. Everyone in the club turns up. A load of civvies from around the area turn up. And again, it's wets and pasties after it, and spin some dits and just try and remember.
And have a good time with the people who are still around.
I mean, it's a difficult conversation. I mean, it's a difficult way to say that, but yeah, you've nailed it. Yeah. Because you don't want to say, go and have a few pints with the boys after it and try and make the best of a bad day. But that's what it is. You try and have a conversation, you try and turn it, mate, into, you raise a glass, of course. But yeah, you try and enjoy the time with the people who are still about. Definitely.
No point fucking sitting in the shower and crying, is there? Like, really? Doesn't achieve anything.
It doesn't. No, you're all right, mate. You're spot on there. It's it's one of those.
Yeah. So with the sports and stuff, then do you find you get a lot of ex-military lads gravitating towards those teams, and if so, why do you think that is?
I certainly see that a huge amount in the Northwest. Now you got to imagine I'm in football territory up here, and there's not, aside from cage fighting, mate, not many that kinetic sports where you can get rough and tumble with people. And what we tend to see, mate, is there's a load of Fijian lads up here, who are ex-army. A load of Fijian lads, and they're all looking for rugby. There's a load of ex-bongos, there's a couple of crabs, not a lot of them, a couple of crabs. Everyone sort of gravitates to the rugby club. And I think there's an element of camaraderie, mate. You grew up in Wales the same as me. There's an element of camaraderie that comes with rugby that you tend not to have with football. Football is very division. That's what I sort of see with it. Everyone's got their own team, and even if you go and try and watch a game, mate, everyone's in separate stands. They're trying to keep you away from each other. Rugby's a different animal altogether. It's inclusive. It brings everyone together. And from what I can see in the Northwest, mate, a huge portion of the guys playing rugby are either ex-military, serving, or have got some sort of military connection.
I'm Master Aircrew Andy Wellham-Jones. I'm currently with the Voyager Force as a mission support officer for the Voyager air-to-air refueling aircraft, and as a sideline, I'm also a Dakota loadmaster for the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight.
So a Dakota, that's the kind of the workhorse Second World War plane that people will know from Band of Brothers?
It is, yes, exactly.
How did you get into that?
So the Royal Air Force maintain a commitment to keep the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight flying, and they draw personnel from the Air Mobility Force and the Rotary Force for loadmasters to operate the aircraft. So a few years ago, when the last trawl came out for volunteers to serve on the flight, I applied at that point, got accepted, and have never looked back since, and now completed 3 years with the team.
That's amazing. It must be like dream team kind of thing. It must be highly subscribed.
It is, and in terms of the way that the flight operates, we often get a number of people looking to actually recruit onto the team at that point every time that the trawl comes through, and it's a case of we're lucky enough that we can select those that are suitable for the position as it comes up, and it is pretty amazing. You still have to kick yourself every time you fly on the aircraft.
Dude, I feel that way just when I see the pictures, that we have these machines still going. The most beautiful machines ever created, in my mind, that whole era of aircraft.
They are, yes.
Do you have a particular favourite?
The Dakota is obviously clearly my favourite as I operate on that aircraft. But when you're stood next to the Lancaster, that steals the show every time when there's only 2 of them left flying.
Yeah, my granddad was on Lancaster, so that when I see that one, that's a particular kind of like lump in the throat. What else does the memorial flight have for people that aren't familiar?
So we have 2 Hurricanes on the flight, and 6 Spitfires and 2 Chipmunks.
6 Spitfires. Wow. Let's say. And who owns them?
They're owned by the Royal Air Force.
Wow.
So we own them pretty much as taxpayers. We all own them.
If we get rid of the RAF regiment, can we buy more Spitfires?
Definitely.
All right, excellent. I got another reason to get rid of them. So how is it that the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight, obviously, like, it's a memorial, it's about remembrance. How is it that you go about kind of achieving that mission?
So in terms of what we do is we're there to celebrate the history of the Royal Air Force and commemorate the people that have previously been there. And obviously we're there to inspire the future generations as well. So we're there to remember anybody that's fallen from the Air Force at that time, from its start right the way through to the present day. And we obviously do that by maintaining our museum without walls, as we like to refer to it, our priceless relics from the past, to keep them airworthy for as long as we possibly can, so that the souls of those that have fallen fly with us still from now on until the end.
Is it possible, if you maintain an airframe like that, for it to just keep going and keep going?
It is, in terms, as long as you can get spare parts for them, then everything should be pretty good. We can keep going in that sense on there. And we have a rolling plan with the actual aircraft that they will keep rolling them for about 30 years at a time. And as we get to the end of that, we then look to get more spares or manufacture new components to keep them airworthy.
Amazing. How many Spitfires and Hurricanes and stuff, how many are actually out there in the world in flying condition?
So the Spitfires there's quite a few, and actually there's a new company that are building a slightly smaller version of the Spitfire, and they're still building those today. Hurricanes are slightly more rare. I believe there's 6 flying Hurricanes in the UK. And then there are, in terms of Dakotas, we've got there was 3,000 initially built of the C-47A, and we still have 500 of those flying in the worldwide.
I've seen the Lancaster, not in person. I mean, I wish I had. I've seen it do the drops with the poppy drops. How do you go about doing? How do you go about doing that? Because I'm sure it's probably not as simple as just chucking a bunch of poppies in the back, is it?
It isn't as simple as that, and unfortunately we've had it withdrawn at the moment, because we did do a poppy drop a few years ago where the poppies were loaded into the bomb bay, and they were loaded into sort of like paper bags inside that would burst open when they hit the airflow. Unfortunately, the poppies froze inside, and when they opened the bomb bay doors, they fell out in one block. So so that would be pretty embarrassing to kill some of our veterans by dropping a poppy block on them.
What a way to go!
So it would be. So for safety reasons at the moment, unfortunately, we're not able to still do the poppy drops, but hopefully we will get that back one day.
Yeah, because I mean, it just looks incredible. I suppose you could just throw them in buckets out the side of the Dakota. Have you done the jobs where you've taken up the guys into Arnhem and those kind of events?
We have, yes. We do that regularly whenever we possibly can. The Dakota is still cleared to parachute from it. So for commemorative reasons, we will drop the Falcons for display purposes, and also members of 16 Air Assault for commemorative occasions like Arnhem itself. And very often we try and fly as many of the veterans as we possibly can.
I just think it's amazing to see those veterans, you know, in the back of the aircraft. Obviously, unfortunately, you know, fewer and fewer of them every year. Were you involved with the D-Day, the D-Day anniversaries?
So I flew some of the D-Day sorties that took place in the UK. I did the fly past over Portsmouth on the actual day of the D-Day landings, and then handed over to another crew who then operated on the drops over on the D-Day landing zones. So unfortunately, I didn't do the actual paradrop that year, but I was involved on the D-Day fly pasts on the UK side.
That must have been incredible.
Yes. And again, one of the other ones that we've had this year is obviously Sir Tom Moore's funeral as well. When we flew over his funeral to the sort of second, that was pretty remarkable for us. That was a very, very poignant occasion.
Wow, yeah, I mean, yeah, just unbelievable. I mean, the planning that must go into these things must be a ridiculous amount.
It's surprisingly often the one for Captain Tom Moore was very, very short notice. We weren't initially going to be planned to do anything, and then all of a sudden we got wind that there was an event happening. We were asked to do it, and in terms of the timings and the routes, we can draw that up very, very quickly. We can do that within 24 hours pretty much. Wow. And time it with everybody else. So it was pretty much for that one. We choreographed it with the army to work out the timings for the funeral procession, and they said, can you be on top at this time? We put it into the planning computer, and the line was drawn very, very quickly.
Amazing. I mean, that's something. My granddad was a navigator on Lancasters. I'm sure he would have loved one of those planning computer. Probably would have come in very handy for him. So
yes,
what do you have planned this year for Remembrance Sunday?
So unfortunately, our aircraft go into winter maintenance themselves, because obviously they need a little bit of looking after at that point. But I myself are possibly going to be laying a wreath in Korea.
Wow, how'd that come about?
We've got a task that we're going over to Korea at that point. So hopefully I'm going with my squadron commander for defence engagements, and we happen to be in Korea at the time that we'll be able to lay a wreath in celebration over in Korea for remembrance for the fallen.
I'm Steve Craddock. I served with the Royal Engineers for just about 15 years. I'm just a little bit short of that. I served in Germany, Denmark, a lot of time in Northern Ireland, UK, and a few other places. Like I was attached to G Squadron out in Kenya for 3 months. So yeah, I got around a little bit.
Steve, when were you first introduced to the idea of remembrance?
It goes back quite a long time in my family. My father served with the Durham Light Infantry, and he fought through North Africa, went in on the first wave at Salerno in Italy, and then fought all the way up through Italy. That brought it home to me as quite a young age that, you know, that there was something there. I didn't really fully understand as a young lad, but as time's gone on, I've realised it, and as I got into my teens, and then when I joined the army at 17, it all came to me, you know, why we try every year, or for many of us, as you know, we remember almost every day, but specifically for Remembrance Sunday, just remembering those from so many years ago who've lost their lives on behalf of the country.
Was it something that your dad talked about much?
He didn't talk a hell of a lot. You know, the first time I heard him really talking about it, I bought one of the Spike Milligan books, Mussolini, My Party's Downfall, or something like that. You know? And I was reading it. He says, "Can I have a look at it?" And I caught him reading it a day or so later, and he was laughing, but then he had tears in his eyes, because some of the bits in there, he just remembered. He remembered Bear Arse Ridge, where the DLI fought up through and lost so many men and stuff like that. And then I talked to him a bit about it, and at that point, and probably the only time he actually opened up to what it was like over them sort of 3.5 years that he was fighting, you know, in one of the worst parts of World War II.
Did he go to parades and things like that?
No, he didn't.
that seems to be a constant that we're kind of finding with World War II veterans. Is that, you know, they weren't really going to parades and stuff, and obviously you can understand why.
Yeah.
Such an open wound to them. And yeah. So, did you go to parades yourself as a like before you were in the military as a young man?
No, I just remember that on the Saturday night before Remembrance, we all had to sit down and watch the Festival of Remembrance from the Albert Hall. And then we all made sure we were up and breakfasted before watching the ceremony at the Cenotaph and the old boys marching past the Cenotaph. So we were made to do that every year.
Have you been to the Albert Hall?
I haven't been to the Albert Hall, no. I haven't.
Well, we need to get that changed, mate, because you've earned your place in there 100%.
Yeah.
You've raised a lot of money for charity. Is that something that you see as part of the kind of wider picture of Remembrance?
Absolutely. We all go by our experiences, and my experience in Northern Ireland, and having lost one exceptionally close mate who was in three para in Crossmaglen when I was up in Londonderry. I didn't even know Billy was out in Northern Ireland. And I got home off leave and found out he'd been killed, and I'd been on patrol the same night. And I think from that, it was always something that I needed to remember. So we have it from our own experience of Remembrance, in our own time, but we also then remember why we're a country as we are, because so many men over so many years gave their lives, in conflicts from everything from the First World War, Second World War, Borneo, Cyprus, Malaya. You can just keep going on. The Falklands, Northern Ireland, Afghan. It just goes on. And I think it's right that we pause for a moment and remember those who can't be with us.
What do you think we do well as a country with Remembrance, and where do you think we could improve?
We do very well with the Cenotaph. I think a lot of councils around the country do organise remembrance services. I just think that maybe we should not just think about it on Remembrance Sunday. I go to two events. We have a local Armistice Day. Whenever there's an Armistice Day, which is not on the 11th, we have an Armistice Parade, and I go up to the Naval Memorial here in Chatham, and it's almost a naval service, but it is something that we remember on Armistice Day. And then I go to the Royal Engineers here in Chatham for Remembrance Sunday. I just think we just need, I think if we can talk about it more in schools, more education as to what happened, the goods and the bad of it, of what happened in those two world wars, and why we had to send so many young men, and in some cases women, to their deaths to fight, for freedom. I think that would be a way of really remembering, if we educated people as to why we do it, and not say that we're some sort of glorifying it, because yourself, there is no fucking glory when the shit's hit the fan. There's no glory in it. It's just shit and mud and filth. So we're commemorating and we're remembering. We're not glorifying.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I saw recently on your social media that you've got, you had Dennis Hutchins on there.
Yeah.
And I can't even imagine, to be honest. I mean, a friend of mine, Brian Wood, was dragged through the courts, but fortunately is no longer dragged through the courts.
Yeah.
Is that, with it being this time of year and stuff as well, is that must be a very kind of bitter, leave a very bitter taste in your mouth?
It makes me angry. It makes me upset. Makes me so very sad that people like Dennis, who were doing the job, and whatever happened that evening, on so many occasions, the British Army has shown exemplary conduct in the face of some heavy stuff coming down on us. And I think for those who want to rewrite history, the thing is with it, Jay, it doesn't bother them. They don't care about getting a conviction. Do you understand that? They don't care. It's in the news. It gives them a chance, because if he got off with it, they'd say, there you are, British justice, like, letting this man who murdered this young man, he's got off with it. If he got convicted, there you go, we proved it. It doesn't matter to them. It's just the part of rewriting the history of the Troubles.
Yeah. Do you think that, because I'll just say my opinion on this, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but for me, I hate seeing politicians come out and talk about Remembrance Day, because then their actions show that they don't actually care. And that's just me. Maybe I'm too cynical. I don't want them at remembrance parades, and that's just my opinion. Is that, like, what is it like to be a Northern Ireland veteran and to see someone like Dennis go through the court, and then at the same time to have the politicians be the ones who are laying wreaths at the cenotaph?
I think in many cases it's rank hypocrisy, because they don't care. They are there because it allows them to be seen. Now, that's not all. We can't tar them all with the same brush. Good few of the politicians did serve, and they understand. But there's so many of them, they're not interested. They don't care. They like to show it, and when something happens, they like to be up there talking about it, whatever, but the next day they're not interested. And that's the thing that actually is quite hurtful, because, we went and did our job, and we don't want bigging up for it or anything like that, but we just want people to look after those who are struggling to look after themselves. I'm fine. I went through a bad time, but I'm fine. I don't need any help from anybody. But there are many guys who still do. And this sort of thing that's been out with Dennis, and there are going to be some other ones brought forward. I think there's 4 or 5 more in the pipeline are going to be pulled up. It's just upsetting that it's all in the news. The mainstream media, all they do is talk about what the soldiers did. They don't talk about what was happening at the time. Had they come under fire? Did they have 2 mates killed the day before? They just don't talk about that. It's this is a British soldier who shot up and whatever, and they are part of Sinn Féin IRA. They're part of that thing of rewriting this message, and that hurts.
I guess part of remembering is understanding. I was talking. We've had a guest on this whose father, was a Lancaster crew. My granddad was Lancaster crew, and we were talking. They were both involved in the bombing of Dresden, and it wasn't something that anybody wanted to do.
Yeah, but
it was something that was done, and a heavy burden to live with. And I think maybe part of remembrance is understanding that war is messy and war is terrible, and unfortunately things will happen which we wish didn't happen, but you can't go over and nitpick these things out of there, because if you do, look, if we were going to be good, true, innocent humans, then we wouldn't have any war at all. So the idea that we can have some war but then some parts of it are not justified seems kind of crazy. But what to you is the kind of like the true, if there's one thing that you wanted somebody that hasn't come across Remembrance before, because unfortunately it's not something that everybody knows about, but if you could sit down with somebody and talk to them, and what would you want to say to them is the main thing for them to take away about it?
Remembrance is a commemoration of those that lost their lives on both sides, on all sides, because of man's stupidity. However, there are times when some dictator or some megalomaniac raises his head and somebody has to stand up and put him down. And there are times where there is a justifiable war. It is not nice. We don't celebrate war. There is no glorious dead in this world. There's nothing glorious about some guy shitting his life away in some filthy trench in Ypres or in Flanders or in on the Somme. But if we don't remember, we are constantly going to make the mistakes. It is about education. I think that is one of the big things I want to try and put across, because what we do, there's a few of us, we go to a school in the week before, and we take part in the school's commemoration, and then we go around the classrooms and the kids ask us questions, and we're there with our medals on and all that, and the kids ask us questions, and we talk about remembrance, and we try and talk about, that so many people died on both sides, and that although our commemoration is mainly for the British, I feel just as sad when I cycle through the battlefields of the Somme and Flanders and Normandy, when I go to the German graves. Many of those guys weren't Nazis and they were just doing what they were told, and they had to fight. So I think education around it all is what I would try and say to people is that, look, there are two sides. However, in the Great War and the Second World War and the other wars that we've been involved in, to a degree, we've been standing up on the right side of it. But there is another side, and that is the Germans and how they were treated by their own government and whatever. So I think you need to educate them in the round and not just from our perspective.
What do you do for Remembrance Day?
I go to the Cannon pub, because I live in Chatham, which is the home of the court, has been for nearly 200 years. I go to the Cannon pub, which is the court pub, at 9:30 in the morning. At 10 o'clock, Pauline brings out the bottles of port. We all stand round, there's probably 30, 40 of us, and we stand round with a glass of port and a spicy pickled onion in my hand. I don't know where the pickled onion come from, but we have a pickled onion, and we toast absent friends. We drink the port and eat the pickled onion, and then we go round to the court church just round the corner. And then normally we will march down from the church down into the barracks, where we'll lay wreaths at the War Memorial within Brompton Barracks, and then I go in the Sergeant Smiths and have a dinner and get blooded.
You've obviously been going to remembrance services for a long time. What has the attendance been like over the years? Has it fluctuated?
Well, I think in Chatham, because it's such a massive military area, it had the biggest naval dockyards from the 17th century, and there was something like, at some points, there was something like 15 different regiments recruiting in Chatham.
Wow.
Every single soldier that left to go to the Wars of Independence in America left from Chatham. HMS Victory was built here. This is the home of the Corps of Royal Engineers and everything. I think there are so many people who are related to or married to or whatever to a squaddy or to a naval end. So in this area, we have it very well attended. There's two other ones as well which are quite well attended. So in the Medway towns here where I live, the military is very much part of the community, and I think that makes it, well, popular is not the right word, but people want to come and remember, because so many people have got the history in the family and that.
Steve, any parting words, mate?
Let's just sit down, think about it in the round, but also let's remember that so many guys, young men, who had to go out and sort the shit out that politicians couldn't, and we suffer the crap for it. And then the politicians don't do anything for us when we come home.
Andrew Dodson, I'm an ex-Kingo, 25171277. During the King's Regiment in 2002 or 2003, I can't remember exactly which one. I spent the next 7 years there. I did everything I wanted to do. Been to Iraq, I've been everywhere the King's Regiment went up until I was discharged in 2009. And here I am now. I'm now a ground worker, driving machines all over the place for all different people. And I've been through the mill. I've seen it with everything. everything you bring back from war, not just sand in your kit either. Everyone brings it back. But I'm better now. I'm better, and here I am.
So, mate, when did you first get introduced to the idea of remembrance?
From a young age, by my granddad. My granddad, he drummed it into every one of us about Remembrance Day, and it was through my granddad from when I was little. I used to actually look forward to Remembrance Day, Remembrance Sunday, and going to the church and watching to the bagpipes or watching them play the last post and that and lay the wreath and all that. It was drummed into me from a young age, but as I got older and when I joined up and all, and as life progressed, it meant more to me because I could relate to it more, and more so when I left the army, because obviously I had mates that didn't leave the army and they never ever got to leave the army. You know what I mean? And it's part of me. It means a lot to me, Remembrance Day, and it should mean a lot to everybody.
Do you go to like a really local service, or do you go to a big one in Liverpool, or what do you do for that?
Depending where I am. Last Remembrance Day, I was in work. It was working in Liverpool city centre on a Lime Street job, and I went to, where did we go to? By George's Road. It was packed. There was thousands of people there. They released poppy leaves. They blew them into the sky from St John's Tower and all kinds. It was brilliant. And on every Remembrance Sunday, every single one, I go to All Saints Church, which is my local church in Speke. We go round, we get round there about 10:30, 11 with a cup of tea with our little veterans badges on, and we were standing there and we always see people, see friends, see people who you just know. But it's a good day. I always make time. I always try and take people who some people haven't got a clue about Remembrance, and I try and give them that by taking them there. Come with me this morning, and I try and give them that. But I always end up by the church on Sunday. Always end up having a little pint or a cup of tea after it. Or I like Remembrance Day.
That's a really good point you're making there, mate. About, because one of the things, I mean, I do this myself, is you meet up with your veteran mates, but like you're saying, we already know. So I think what you're doing there in taking somebody else is maybe something that, like, definitely I will think of myself now of taking other people, and maybe that's something that the listeners can take away. What kind of like reactions have you had from the people that you've taken to it? Do you think it's something that stuck with them?
Yeah, because I see them there the year after.
Right.
When you bump into them a few weeks later, they always mention it. Remember that Sunday? Do you remember Remembrance Day? And they always have a poppy on, which you never wore a poppy before. A lot of people don't know what the poppy is for. They don't know what the story behind it, and it hurts me because the poppy, there's a story behind the poppy that everyone should know, and it's not just, you don't just wear a poppy because it's Remembrance Day. There's an actual story behind the poppy and where they come from.
What does the symbol of the poppy mean to you?
Exactly, it's the story behind it. Out of all that mud and death and blood in the earth, so there's always something can grow, something will always live on. Something will always live on, and it'll grow back, and it'll always be there regardless. Look at it whatever way you want, but that's how poppies. That's the poppy is everything. You couldn't get a better symbol for it.
No, I agree, mate. What do you think we do well in this country when it comes to remembrance, and what do you think we could do better?
We make a fuss about it. That's all we can do, really. We make a fuss about it for obvious reasons, and I don't think we could. The only thing we could do better is try and teach more people about it. Because there's a lot of people who don't stop at 11 o'clock. They just carry on. It means nothing to them. And if we could get the message to them people about it, what it's for, they might understand. If they don't, it's up to them. But I think we could spread the message a bit more somehow, as if we haven't already do it. But that's what I think we could do better. Try and spread the word like I do each and every time. If I can find someone who doesn't know about it and take them out for a Sunday and let them see it, feel it, then the world might be a better place.
And what do you think you'll be doing for it this year?
I'll be in work, obviously. I will stop. I always do. I'll make sure everyone else stops as well if I'm in work. on Remembrance Day, but on the Sunday, I like every Remembrance Sunday, I'll probably go to my local church, stand there, I'll meet up with Wellesley, see whoever else is there, and we'll have a chat. We might have a pint after it, we might not. But it's always a little special, chilled Sunday on Remembrance Day to remember not just friends from the army, but friends in general who we've lost, family, etc. It's not just about war to me. It's a special day.
Well, I guess you're right there, mate, because it's very hard to reflect on the loss of a couple of people and not think about the bigger picture, isn't it?
Of course. They're not the only people that aren't with us anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And the person who introduced me to Remembrance Day, he's no longer with us as well, my granddad. So I do it for him as well. You know what I mean?
When you go to Remembrance Parade, mate, are you a beret and medals man, or are you what's your dress code?
I'm more of a casual with me veterans badge on. I wear jeans. If it's normally raining, I wear a jeans, a coat.
It is usually raining.
Me veterans badge. But I'm not a beret guy, me.
No, I'm not a beret guy either, mate. If I got the coat on, I might put the medals on the coat.
This year, I'm buying a special hoodie actually.
All right.
For you remember me no bleeps given t-shirt I had on last time I come to see you.
Yeah.
Every year they bring out a new range of hoodies with poppy badges on them and
all right.
Help for Heroes, broken crayons, still colour. But I'm gonna get a fresh one of them.
All right. Any parting words for people, mate, about Remembrance, about what it means to you, or what you'd encourage people to do?
What I'll say is, on the 11th of November at about 10:45, stop what you're doing and think about it. Just stop what you're doing, because if you look, everyone else has stopped. Just have a little minute or two at 11 o'clock and be quiet. Stop what you're doing. Take it easy for a minute and just think about it, because it's all about the life we live now wouldn't be the way it is if it wasn't for them people.
When you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow we gave our today.